So this quarter we have a few talks or a theme about innovation and technology. Most of the talks would be about those kinds of themes. So today I wanted to kind of initiate a discussion that will continue a little bit next week with Bertrand's talk and also in other talks later this quarter about technology in education. And as you know, especially in Brazil, it became something very important in the public debate about education. So the goal of today and this other talks is to just give you some elements to kind of reflect about it in a more interesting, sophisticated way. So today, I want you to leave as much time for conversation and discussion as possible, and whether you will be the discussant. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. So I always start my talks acknowledging my students and postdocs. So there they are, and also some of my collaborators in other departments here at Stanford in engineering and also in other universities around the world. So this is Professor Brito Cruz from bioengineering, Professor Okamura from mechanical engineering, and Professor Sipi Takyat from the computer engineering department in Chiang Mai University in Thailand. So I want to start this discussion talking about equity, and so this is kind of the theme of the day in education. Everybody talks about equity, and the way I want to talk about this with you is contrasting or reflecting about what's the difference between equity and sameness. So historically, we have, and we'll go more into that later, but we've believed that to give everyone, equitable educational opportunities, we had to give everyone exactly the same. So the same content, the same curriculum, and all of that. And recently, people have been debating if this is really achieving the results that we want to achieve. If giving everybody exactly the same will achieve equity. And so one of the elements in this discussion is, for example, a lot of the research has been done on what some people call like active learning or project-based learning. And so there is a big, very comprehensive review by Linda Darling-Hammond and Bridget Barron here from Stanford. And those are three important conclusions from this review: that students learn more deeply when they can apply the knowledge to real-world problems, when they use active learning practices that has a more significant impact on their performance than any other variable, including their background and prior achievement, and that students are most successful when they are taught how to learn as well as what to learn. There's some other type of research, for example, this longitudinal studies by two professors from Indiana University that found that the best predictor for a STEM career choice is more than course taking or performance, is self-declared interest in science in 8th grade. So they have this questionnaire, they ask thousands of kids, do you see yourself as a scientist? Do you think science is interesting? Questions like that. And so those kinds of questions they found have more predictive power in a STEM career choice in college than even the grades of the the students and which courses they decide to take. So I think the point here is that we have been focusing a lot over the years, over decades, about the curriculum and the content and giving everyone the same, and we've realized, and we are realizing that the way you deliver the content or the way students engage in learning the content is as important as what they are learning. Also, as you know, a lot of, I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of research on how much students actually remember of the content after they're tested, and very kind of neat studies in from cognitive sciences and psych, ed psych, showing that students, a week later they remember less than 50%, and like a month later less than 25% of what they. So that's just a background to get into the main thing that I want to talk about today, which is this difference between instructional technologies and what I call constructional technologies. And so let me stop now and ask you, volunteers, like what could be the difference between those two?
What is already available. For example, I would do research in some website and kind of substitute the textbook for the computer, but it's the same. And constructional maybe is when the student use the technology as a tool for build something new or some knowledge new for him or for her.
Great explanation. Anyone else?
I hear instructional technology is like something that's more just one way, the computer just giving out, just like as a lecture, but instead of a lecture, you have a computer giving out the direct instructions and no or little interaction. Whereas constructional, you're building, interacting with the systems.
In terms of epistemology, it's like construction would be linked to constructivism, where knowledge is not given, neither inborn with the subject, but it's constructed in the interaction. While instructional is more outside to inside knowledge. Build something like that.
Yeah. So those are all great different aspects of this explanation, and we'll go more into that in the next few minutes. But so before I go too much into that, I want to show you some videos from a very long time ago. Some of you might have watched those videos, and then we'll talk about them. I don't want to say much, prompt you too much, but so this is B.F. Skinner, right? You might know. This video is from the 50s, and so anyway, this video is from the 50s, and it's about an invention that he perfected and kind of created, called the teaching machine. So he's going to talk about this machine, what it is, what it does, and all of that. I might not play the entire thing, but just I want you to pay particular attention to. Not only to the description of the technology, but to the promise of the technology. So what kinds of things he talks about, he said, what kind of predictions and what kind of new learning opportunities he claims that this machine would make possible. So,
These young young people are studying in a new way. Class in spelling, it might as well be arithmetic or algebra or grammar, or in fact anything involving the use of words or symbols. Each student is using a teaching machine, a device which creates vastly improved conditions for effective study. What are teaching machines? How are they used? What can they teach? Who prepares the material they teach? And how does this material differ from textbooks, lectures, and educational television? What impact will machine teaching have on school organization? Some of these questions can be answered in at least a preliminary way. I am E.F. Skinner, Professor of Psychology at Harvard University. I should like to discuss some of the reasons why studying with the help of a teaching machine is often dramatically effective. With the machine you have just seen in use, the student sees a bit of text or other printed material in a window. This may be a sentence or two or an equation in arithmetic. Some small part is missing, and the student must supply it by writing on an exposed strip of paper. His response may be the answer to a question or the solution of a problem, but generally it is simply a symbol or word which completes the material he has just read. As soon as the student has written his response, he operates the machine and learns immediately whether he is right or wrong. This is a great improvement over the system in which papers are corrected by a teacher, where the student must wait perhaps till another day to learn whether or not what he has written is right. Such immediate knowledge has two principal effects. It leads most rapidly to the formation of correct behavior. The student quickly learns to be right. But there is also a motivating effect. The student is free of uncertainty or anxiety about his success or failure. His work is pleasurable. He does not have to force himself to study. A classroom in which machines are being used is usually the scene of intense concentration. One function of a teaching machine then is to give the student a quick report on the adequacy of his response. This is important not only for efficient learning, it generates a high level of interest and enthusiasm. Another important advantage is that the student is free to move at his own pace. With techniques in which a whole class is forced to move forward together, the bright student wastes time, waiting for others to catch up. And the slow student, who may not be inferior in any other respect, is forced to go too fast. Not quite completing one day's assignment, he is even less likely to complete a second. And he gets farther and farther behind, and often gives up altogether unless remedial steps are taken. A student who is learning by machine moves at the rate which is most effective for him. The fast student covers a course in a short time, but the slower student, by giving more time to the subject, can cover the same ground. Both learn the material thoroughly. A third feature of machine teaching is that each student follows a carefully constructed program, leading from the initial stage where he is wholly unfamiliar with the subject to a final stage in which he is competent. He does this by taking a large number of very small steps, arranged in a coherent order. Each step is so small that he is almost certain to take it correctly. The material is designed to give the student as much help as possible. He is not in any sense being tested. Instead, helpful hints, suggestions, and prompts maximize the chances that he will be right. The fact that each step is very small is important. Even though it may not seem like much of an accomplishment, it is always progress in the right direction. Programs have been constructed in which, without any prior study, the average student is right 95% of the time. This result is partly due to the fact that the student only moves on when he has completely mastered all the preceding material. If he is absent, he does not miss any work because he takes up where he left off upon returning to the machine. A conservative estimate seems to be that with these machines, the average grade or high school student can cover about twice as much material with the same amount of time and effort as with traditional classroom techniques. There is no magic about this. A teaching machine is simply a convenient way of bringing the student into contact with the man who writes the program. It is the author of the program, not the machines, who teaches. He stands in the same position as a textbook writer, except that he is much closer to the student. He and the student are constantly interacting. This interaction can be mediated in different ways, of course, and each way means a different kind of teaching machine, each having special features and advantages. Here's Dr. Arthur Lumsden of the University of California in Los Angeles, who will discuss several possibilities with you.
So what do you think of anything familiar?
Nowadays.
Yeah. Or
Yeah. Sounds like the modern X to the smartphone.
So what does it sound like?
Yeah, if you substitute the machine to online learning, it still makes sense. Do a song.
Same logic.
So just the person who invented the machine was this other guy, and then got perfected by it. And those are some just examples of products at the time. They were like, spelling game. This is like a simplified machine, and you could buy all these packages that you put in there. They were like, pieces of paper with like the question, and then you write the answer here. So it's like you put it inside like a card that you install. There were then experimental models of this is called the Videosonic teaching machine, which uses colored slides and pre-recorded magnetic tape audio instruction. Right? So you can see that photo might sound familiar to some of you. The student with the headphones looking at the, and this was a more advanced version, but the same thing. There was even like machines for driving that you sit on a motorbike. So it was a very and this is the kind of advertising that just as curiosity. Like you learn fast, the whole family learns, and what. So this is like what. This is about one of the schools where they were trying to say would you use as the official character experiment. The result is a special classroom in this high school with 3 dictaphone machines hooked by earphone to 30 desks. With the aid of a channel selector at each desk, the student can bring in any one of the 3 lessons pre-recorded on a plastic belt. The system allows students to work at their own best learning rate and frees the teacher for individual tutoring. And then, talking about the time savings, and teachers will be able to pay more attention to the broader aims of education than mere repetition of facts and dates, and enjoying the stimulus of a constant check of his progress and the pleasure of being rewarded promptly when the work is correct. The pupil has a feeling of accomplishment. So, if you look at this, old newspaper, it's quite fascinating. So this last one is, according to the specialists, so they're asking like some, researchers and specialists. Far from making teaching less personal, it will make more so. These machines leave the teacher free to more creative aspects of teaching, including more individual attention to students and more conferences with their parents. And so this is like the whole family learning, sisters learning spelling, mothers learning music, etc. Interesting. Anyway, so. Any more comments or anything familiar about that? If you show the second. Okay, so this is the second video. Sorry about the projector, I don't know what's weird.
Khan Academy is most known for its collection of videos. So before I go any farther, let me show you a little bit of a montage.
So the hypotenuse is now going to be 5. This animal's fossils are only found in this area of South America, a nice clean band here, and this part of Africa. We could integrate over the surface, and the notation usually is a capital sigma.
We have a million students a month. We now have on the order of 2,200 videos covering everything from basic arithmetic all the way to vector calculus and some of the stuff that you saw up there. We have a million students a month using the site, watching on the order of 100 to 200,000 videos a day. But what we're going to talk about in this is how we're going to the next level. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about really just how I got started. And some of y'all might know, about 5 years ago, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. And I was in Boston, and I was tutoring my cousins in New Orleans remotely. And I started putting the first YouTube videos up really just as kind of a nice to have, just kind of a supplement for my cousins, something that might, give them a refresher or something. And as soon as I put those first YouTube videos up, something interesting happened. Actually, a bunch of interesting things happened. The first was the feedback from my cousins. They told me that they preferred me on YouTube than in person. And once you get over the backhanded nature of that, there was actually something very profound there. They were saying that they preferred the automated version of their cousin to their cousin. At first it's very unintuitive, but when you actually think about it from their point of view, it makes a ton of sense. You have this situation where now they can pause and repeat their cousin. Now they can, without feeling like they're wasting my time, they could, if they have to review something that they should have learned a couple of weeks ago or maybe a couple of years ago, they don't have to be embarrassed and ask their cousin. They can just watch those videos. If they're bored, they can go ahead. They can watch it at their own time, at their own pace. And probably the least appreciated, aspect of this is the notion that the very first time that you're trying to get your brain around a new concept, the very last thing you need is another human being saying, do you understand this? And that's what was happening with the interaction with my cousins before, and now they can just do it kind of in the intimacy of their own room. The other thing that happened is, I put them on YouTube just for the, I saw no reason to make it private, so I let other people watch it, and then people started stumbling on it, and I started getting some comments and some letters and all sorts of kind of feedback from random people around the world, and these are just a few. This is actually from one of the original calculus videos, and someone wrote just on YouTube, it was a YouTube comment. First time I smiled doing a derivative. And let's pause here. This person did a derivative, and then they smiled. And then in response to that same comment, this is on the thread, you can go on YouTube and look at these comments. Someone else wrote, same thing here. I actually got a natural high and a good mood for the entire day. Since I remember seeing all of this matrix text in class, and here I'm all like, I'll
stop again for a moment. So, first I want to ask, what kind of similarities do you see between those two kind of discourses about instruction and education? Or is there any similarity, maybe or not?
I think one thing is,
No, I was just going to say that the idea that you have your own time and pace and you're not wasting another person's time.
Right.
Efficiency, somewhat.
That's one that was pretty clear.
yeah, it's along those lines, that the idea that interaction is waste of time.
talks about going, rewinding a video, he assumes that you learn by watching again something you didn't clearly understood versus discussing or debating or interacting with people or critiquing people. It's a different way of thinking about how learning.
And I think
similar
it-
to Skinner.
And I think continually it leaves to the student the judgment whether you should learn more or not, right? Like you should know, I know this enough, or I have to review that next subject and having the teacher. Maybe in the teaching machine you have the teacher all the time, and the idea is that they can help use the time in a different way, but like for Khan Academy, the idea is that you by yourself know what you should learn and what you should not learn.
One thing that caught my attention, I think both talked about like student anxiety. Somewhere like in the teaching machine was saying that the student has to wait for the teacher to answer, to show the right answer, and that gives the student kind of anxious. And he's also talking about how the student interacting with the teacher feels like he's wasting the teacher's time, or kind of fear of disappointing the teacher by saying that he doesn't know. I think this idea of being more independent in both cases, and you're kind of getting it wrong or getting it right by yourself, caught my attention in both cases.
What about the new guys? You know what I mean?
The new guy.
The new guys.
So for the first video, I was thinking that it was kind of like the way he presented the machine was pretty, oh, it's an awesome machine. But then I wonder why it got popular, I mean, until today. And I was thinking, oh, I never used this machine in my life. But then I saw Khan Academy, and I use Khan Academy a lot in my life. So I just realized how maybe different technologies merge and they have different needs for different times. I don't know.
Yeah. So I think other fields are full of stories of similar things. Ideas have been going around for a long time, but just after the right infrastructure and the right technology is in place, the technology is able to take off. So smartphones, the ideas have been around for a long time, but only now that we have connectivity, we have better chips, better processors, batteries, then the technology was able to take off. So I think with this concept of using technology to improve learning, I think it's a similar story. The concept for me was pretty similar. I wouldn't go too far to say that this is a trade-off. I mean, this is a choice between the way that you learn. I think this is just a recognition that for some things, it's better to learn in one way. For other things, it's better to learn in another way. So I think for mathematical concepts, for, I don't know, these formulas, equations, if you have time to go back and forth and to learn by your own, I think you have one or two, and I think that's useful and that's important for some students. Whereas if you need to construct some kind of, I don't know, criticism or more deep discussions, then you have, the interactions are more important.
No, I was just going to say that this is debatable also. I mean, this idea. There are people that study how you learn math, for example, and even here at Stanford, and there's debate within the field about this. So, but I agree, this is one. I just see a fundamental contradiction in their discourse, even both Skinner and Khan, because they say it's a type of autonomy because the student can choose, but the student only can choose between watch again and again and again. It's not a real autonomy. You can view new things because the content is closed there. Even in both machines, in this type of, so it's a essential contradiction. They use this independent discourse, but
Kind of paradox.
no, in this, and I'm not saying all the
Because on YouTube you have many different ways of learning the same thing. So
no, but I'm talking about this for that there are schools that are using Khan Academy. It's not my invention. Schools are using Khan Academy, and students can watch again and again, Khan Academy. That's the math content. So it's closed. In the case of Skinner, that's a closed content. It's not the YouTube as a whole, but Khan Academy and the Skinner machine.
Okay, well,
Last quick thing, I just find it interesting that Khan has all this technology available, but he has no interaction. Right? The machine on paper, Skinner had interaction. He actually wrote something and had feedback. Khan doesn't. So I wonder what if Skinner had done if he had all this technology that we have today. I don't know.
Khan Academy does have actually.
Oh, it does.
They only have exercises and.
Oh, okay. So I haven't seen it in a while.
But very few.
Oh, okay.
Very few interaction.
A few, right?
Very few, yeah. It's mostly just watching videos.
Right.
Yeah, if you pay attention to, I think one of the things, when you pay attention to the videos, the way they're constructed, they are very, they're both Skinner, I think, and the videos we watch are reproducing like a traditional classroom in the sense that there's a lecture. And I show you how come to the right answer. And that's what I'm saying, it's available about like math, for example, how you come up with there's the right answer. So I think if you think that you have a traditional classroom and then you have that thing, maybe it's better because you can go back and watch again, and you cannot do that with the teacher, for example, as you interrupt, whatever. And maybe the teacher is not so good at explaining. But if you think that there are maybe other models of classroom then that we should be comparing against versus just a regular traditional classroom, that I think would be the right question to ask.
yeah, okay, so I think those are all really important questions, and this, I think what you mentioned, the idea that a lot of ideas were kind of around, but the infrastructure was not there. Something that I'll comment in the literature. But I think from my perspective, a lot of I agree with everything you said. I think what's important. The reason I'm showing this is not that let's like bash Khan Academy and Skinner and because it's sort of easy just to say oh, this is bad because it's kind of, there's some obvious aspects of it that are weird, right? That kids are like looking at the screen all the time, all of those things. So that's kind of the easy part of the criticism. But I think there's another aspect which is a lot of the things that we as a society would be able to say in the 40s and 50s about equality and about giving different groups of people the same opportunities and all of that. Today they're quite different, right? So in the 50s there was like racial segregation was like official, for example, right? Sex segregation and discrimination was official. It was kind of unproblematic to say, well, we can't really give the same education to everyone because we don't have the resources. So for some groups of people, we'll give this kind of education, and that's kind of good enough for them. And for other people, we'll do the actual better version of it because that's how the world works. But today, this kind of discourse is you can't make it anymore. You can't say, well, unfortunately, if you live in a black neighborhood, you're not going to get good education because we don't really care. Right? So it's harder to make those arguments, but a lot of the ideology that was in the 50s about equality and all of that is still around. So the discourse has to be more sophisticated. Right? So I think what I wanted you to pay attention to is that a lot of the discourse around how you structure education and how you kind of fulfill our societal dreams for what education should be. A lot of times the ideology is the same, but the discourse is much more sophisticated, including the technology. Right? So a few examples of that, I think what you were saying, for example, this idea of autonomy and doing things at your own pace and all of that. So that's one of the ideals of education that we have, right? That people should pursue their own ideas, they have their own pace of learning, so that should be respected and all that. And so, it's harder today to say, well, actually, I don't care if people have their own rhythm of learning. Everybody needs to learn at the same time, because that's how schools are structured, right? We don't have time for this kind of personalization stuff. So, since you can't say that, but at the same time you're not giving the full, the real freedom or the real learning at your own pace, what I think we are doing with a lot of these solutions is to give, some kind of sprinkles of autonomy and calling it autonomy, and some sprinkles of personalization and saying that education is personalized. But none of that is for real, right? It's just like a little taste that doesn't really realize the idea of autonomy or personalization, of customization, of giving people, the ability to explore things in their own way. But it kind of satisfies our desire to believe that those things are happening or are possible. So if you look at a lot of those, if you look at the videos from the teaching machine, even though there is this claim of they're moving at their own pace, I mean, if you look at the video, you see it's almost like almost literally like a factory where people are doing exactly the same things. Maybe slightly the rhythm of how many exercises you do a minute is slightly different, but as you said, they're following exactly the same. I mean, of course, as Ulysses was saying, it's not that there is a million materials, a million videos, whatever, to learn all kinds of things online, but the way a lot of those systems work is by giving you exactly the same. So I think on the other hand, the other question that I think is important is, I mean, it's easy just to say, videos or those kinds of things, they don't work or they're not the best way of learning, but it's hard to come up with a solution that can be at the same time a promoter of equity and fulfill the kind of economic limitations of educational system. But I think this is the kind of thing that is an ongoing debate and struggle about lots of other things. So, for example, if you think about healthcare, up to like 5 years ago, it was a lot of people were saying, and they still say that, if you don't have money to get proper healthcare, I mean, I don't care. But, it's not my problem. And if you don't have health insurance and you lose your, you ruin your entire life because you had like an accident and you had some serious surgery that you needed. So in the discourse about healthcare, the same kind of thing happened. Like at some point we were, it was okay to give healthcare to just a few, for people who could afford it. And then over the decades, we built a consensus that enormous societal effort had to be given to offering universal health care at an affordable cost to everyone. And in many countries, and starting now in the U.S., this became a reality. And so I think the point I'm making is that to fulfill those ideals of what education should be and all of that, enormous societal effort has to go into that, and that's the kind of thing that is not only we build by on a political level by making sure that there are resources and funding for education. We have to build on a academic level by creating the means and the the curricula and the research that goes with all of that. But it's an ongoing and constant struggle. And I think the other reason I wanted to show those things is that it's a lot easier to offer like magical solutions for those kinds of complex problems because it kind of satisfies our immediate need to believe that some things are already solved and they're not that problematic anymore. But as we know, that's not how either healthcare or education work. So it's an ongoing struggle, and it's much harder to convince people that it's an ongoing struggle than to say that at some point someone will come up with like a magical solution that will solve. So I want you now spend some time talking about some other ways to look at technology in education, and then we'll go for the final debate. So you mentioned that a lot of times ideas are around, and then when the infrastructure is there, they kind of happen in a big time. And so I think this was one example of those ideas were around, and then when the internet infrastructure and kind of online video became possible, it really took off, right? And so I want to talk to you about another kind of technology that where that process happened as well. So I don't know if you had time to read the paper. So I just want to quickly talk about what was it in the paper. So in the paper that you read, we talk about a project that happened in a Brazilian slum called Heliópolis, and this is some pictures, a very poor place as you know, and all of that. And then I tell this story about how I proposed to them to build projects around saving electricity and all of that, and so I guess you might know what happened, but I designed this whole workshop for them about building devices to save electricity. And then I realized when I went there that they had no energy meters, so that was a meaningless workshop for them to get.
The cats.
They have this kind of gap. So, but the point. So I don't want to go too much into this. But I mean, the point of this experience was that even when you're trying to customize and design things that are meaningful to the community and all of that, if you don't really know what people care about, you can make terrible mistakes. And I mean, there's a whole aspect of this that's for another day. But what I want to focus on today is about this. So when we started this project, we brought Lego kits and a lot of different materials, and the kids had to build projects, right? So they built lots of different projects that were kind of meaningful to their life and community. For example, this car is called the cat car because it runs away from water. So if it detects floods, it kind of turns around and goes away. They built trash recycling machines, so prototypes, all using a lot of found materials, and because trash recycling is a meaningful thing for that community. They built prototypes of new kinds of buses that would be comfortable and have like a music and kind of an air conditioning thing. And this bus in particular had a system that when all seats are occupied, so they represent the seats by those keys that have sensors underneath. When all seats are occupied, the red light lights up, so the bus doesn't stop at the bus stop, so people know that the bus is full and it's not stopping. So anyways, I just want to show you a few of these projects, and this was many years ago. But a lot of those kinds of projects, the technology was relatively expensive, which was hard to, the computers in the schools didn't quite work with the kids. Some schools didn't have computers, some schools didn't have the materials and all of that. And back then, showing people this kind of things, people would say, oh, this is nice, but it's sort of, a bit science fiction that he would be able to do those things in schools, this kind of robotics stuff, this project with technology, building things and all of that. But in the same way that, the video learning and all of those things, that the technology and the infrastructure changed, a lot of the technology and the infrastructure also changed in this field, in this world of constructive technology. So technologies that give kids the power and the materials to build and construct things. So what happened in the last 10 years? So first, a lot of the ideas of that inspire this kind of work around progressive education, for example, problem solving and being creative and following your own ideas and coming up with projects and being able to start and finish a project and collaborate with others and all of that. Those which were ideas of progressive education and kind of constructivist education, a lot of those became what we call 21st century skills. And because they were not associated with constructivist researchers and all of that, they came from like policymakers and all of that, then they were taken seriously. So a lot of those ideas, they became, they were kind of grouped in this big label, 21st century skills, and because they were not, they were, adopted by international organizations like, the World Bank and OECD and all of those kind of things as something serious that countries needed to pay attention to, then, they went from being these utopias to being something that policymakers started caring about. So if you go to any Minister of Education, around the world, people will know what 21st century skills are. They will mention to you a few programs in kind of 21st century skills that they are creating and conducting and all of that. So that's the social acceptance. The second part is that the technology itself went from, there was a 100 or 10 times reduction in cost. So, for example, a 3D printer, which would cost $100,000 and 15 years ago, now it costs $1,000. A robotic kit that, the kinds of kits we used in Heliopolis many years ago would easily cost $5,000 in the 1990s, and the Lego kits were about 300 order of magnitude, and now you can buy a robotic for $30, which is less than a textbook. So that was a big factor too. The other one is that private and affluent schools started looking for differentiation, looking for what kind of cool things I can do to differentiate myself from the next door rich school. So they started looking for new things to do, and they found in a lot of this kind of constructive technologies one of those things. And a dramatic growth in the mind share of things like coding, Maker Faire, and Make Magazine. So if you don't know, because you're new in the US, there is something called a Maker Faire, which is an event that happens here in the Bay Area for 200,000 people, and it's now spread into many other countries. So almost every developed country has like this annual maker fair where people bring projects and all kinds of stuff to show. There is a magazine that's very popular too. And coding, which is part of robotics and building things and all of that, also became popular. Even Obama kind of started a program for coding. New York City will mandate that every child has to learn coding in their K-12 life. So that will be a mandatory discipline in school. And finally, there are many tools that were created in the last 10 years, like Scratch that you might know, or Arduino boards and all those kinds of things. And all of those 5 elements were created this thing that we call the maker movement. So I think what I want you, the point that I want to make with this is that at the same time that we had all this growth into kind of instructive technologies and video learning and a lot of distance or blended programs, there was a lot of growth in this other side, like the constructive technologies and in the infrastructure and cost and mind share and social acceptance of this too. So if you're not like in this field of studying the maker movement and all of that, you might not know it, that a lot of this is happening, and that it's bringing a lot of those kind of things where kids build projects and build inventions and all of that into schools in a very sustainable and cost-effective way. And if we have time later, I'll show you some more examples. But I think before I let Rodrigo talk, I think one of the big and important points about this, and going back to the equity question that I was talking about before, this idea of equity and sameness. So I think there are two elements. One is that the way that those two fields are developing is that the maker movement kind of stuff, and fab labs and all of that, it's highly concentrated on affluent and private and independent schools because they have the resources and also more freedom to implement those things in their school. And those are the things that generate the skills that are more valued in the job market, like problem solving, creativity, dealing with technology in sophisticated ways and all of that. And the other kind of use of technology, the more instructive types, the videos and Khan Academy type stuff, it's highly concentrated on low-income schools. I mean, not that it works there, but when people think about how to optimize costs and how to do projects in large-scale public systems, they think about those kinds of solutions. So the problem that we're seeing nowadays, that's been pointed out by many researchers, is that there is a pedagogical divide. So those more advanced pedagogies, where you learn how to problem solve, how to be creative, how to invent things, and all of that, that's been concentrated on people who are already privileged. And these other approaches that do not necessarily foster those kinds of skills, but maybe have other kinds of benefits, but that definitely do not generate this kind of technological self-efficacy and all of that. They are overwhelmingly being implemented in public school systems that are big and that people need cost-effective solutions and all of that. So I think the unintended consequence of this is that those kinds of constructive technologies and all the pedagogies that are built around those technologies, there is a risk that they will be an instrument to further inequality than to eliminate it. Right? And that's, you know, a pretty terrible thing. And so I just want to end, you know, this part before we go to Rodrigo, saying that, you know, it makes, in a way, it makes sense that when you think about very large school systems, you think about this kind of cost reduction measures like, you know, videos or automating different things and all of that. And that you think that, you know, those kinds of things like kids working on projects and building projects and all of that, that those things would be just unfeasible, right, in those large systems. But, you know, but the fact is that if you actually do the calculation of how much those kinds of things cost and how they can be integrated into the curriculum, it's actually not true that they are economically infeasible. And I show you some data that show you how you know, you can acquire those kinds of things for less than what a textbook costs. Right? So I think my main message is that when we think about implementing these more advanced pedagogies and approaches in schools, we should first kind of update our, so there is this preconception that those things are expensive and impossible and unfeasible, and it's just not true anymore. But that's something that, you know, when we go to talk to policymakers, that people still have that idea, because we have this idea that whatever is, you know, anything that's technological is expensive and hard. But that's not true anymore. But it's still hard for people to kind of update what they, you know, they're thinking about those kinds of things. So I have some other things that I want to show, but I want to give Rodrigo like some time to talk.
Morning, everyone. After reading again Dragons in Toilet Trade, I was thinking about the research that Paulo since the first time that I did something that Paulo wrote, and I realized that since 2007, I was traveling in Paraná with Big Study. So I will talk about the appropriation of the research in Paraná. Just one quote from the state that read: cultural and intellectual anthropology, the process of appropriation and creative combination of ideas, theories, products, and process. So after research became public, I think we are researchers, professional teachers, we have kind of appropriation of these words. So after Paulo publishing an essay, what happened there in Paraná, it's in my state. So us also at a time, it was Google board, MIT version, that we worked with this board in Paraná, and I bring 3 cases to share with you some thoughts, ideas, problems of which one this case. So the first one is on the Federal Technological University of Paraná, where this group, Rafael, André, and Marta, used some of the Wittgenstein essays to discuss technology in education. The course was design interação, interaction design. And the idea was, Gazeta do Povo is the biggest, the major press journal in Paraná, and they released a journalistic research about technology in education in Paraná. So the ideas, they assumed that technologies are in school, and the teachers are not prepared for these technologies. So the school is delayed, the kids are ordered, and the professor needs to be transformed to follow these changes, and the professors are from another type. And this research is from 2014. It's recent. So these two slides are from Marta, André, and Rafael, and they bring Paulo's work to the Federal Technological University of Paraná to discuss the Gazeta do Povo news. And they perform work with the they're presenting the article, but they was using the article as serias do ensino eletrônico. And there is big difference between the public text and the Gazeta do Povo news. It's emblematic about the kind of discussion that we can do in the discipline. So, and the second example is when you work with robotics in Guarapuava. It's my city in the interior, in the center of Paraná. And 28 elementary schools was using robotics as an alternative activity for kids. It was used with kids about 8 and 9 years old. And it consists in use and reuse of traditional computer labs. And I consider that it was a subversive political agenda for the education in Guarapuava. And you use around 120 mobile boards there. And the most important thing is that a traditional computer lab eventually becomes like this. You can see a lot of e-waste reuse, but in the walls and the blackboard you can start to see angles and a lot of communications done by teachers and students to remix the computer lab. So I will show you another example.
De Guarapuava, que está usando peças que normalmente iriam para o lixo para montar os próprios brinquedos. Aqui, equipamentos antigos não são esquecidos no armário e muito menos vão para o lixo. São desmontados e viram matéria-prima para as ideias dos alunos. O motor de um gravador de DVD, mais uma lata vazia e palitos viram um helicóptero. Na digamos, linha de produção, ainda tem brinquedos e miniaturas de eletrodomésticos como este ventilador. Como em uma grande fábrica, antes de mais nada, eles projetam tudo no computador.
Isso daqui é ligado na interface, que é isso daqui? Que é ligado com uma chave, tem a porta A, B, C e D.
E se a maioria das crianças de hoje tem muita facilidade para mexer com o computador, para essa turma é uma vitória. Boa parte não tinha a mínima intimidade com essas máquinas, e algumas delas moram em casa que nem energia elétrica tem.
É só na base da vela e não tinha.
E como essa novidade trouxe mudanças, o interesse dessa turminha pela tecnologia, além, é claro, da criatividade, já mostrou bons resultados em sala de aula.
A gente aprendeu mais coisas, assim. Na sala de aula a gente teve mais atenção.
A história das crianças dessa escola rural, longe do centro de Guarapuava, é mais uma prova de que a criatividade está em todos os lugares. Mas é preciso que todos tenham oportunidade para mostrar.
Isso daqui é um monjolo que nós tivemos uma ideia de fazer.
E que faz no monjolo?
Ele dá para uma colher caiada, assim, essas.
E onde que você viu isso?
Na casa da minha avó tinha um.
No futuro, eles tentaram seguir uma profissão nessa área, né? Como engenheiros, arquitetos, programadores. Então, isso é a base para o futuro deles.
This video shows about Paul talked about the career choice. What brings kids to STEAM career? I think it's to have access to this kind of construction at school. The teacher Anderson, who appeared in this video, he is a historian. Now he is a master in history, and even being the historian student, he was the best coding teacher that I ever met. But the people consider that, oh, he's a historian, so he can't really work with informatics, but it was a personal skill that I hope he can exercise on his doctorate degree. And the problems with this initiative in a local government. So the lack of support of pedagogical team, because they established a dispute between SEBRAE, that's Pedagogia Empreendedora, Entrepreneurial Pedagogy, and robotics education. But SEBRAE provided in that time workbooks, tests, and scores. And even the ProInfo is a government program to provide schools with computer labs, but I agree that it's a traditional computer lab when you have computers near of the walls, and every student will be in front of computer doing exercises, tracking tests. And so it's much similar with the Skinner learning machine. And nowadays, there is a dedicated space called Lab in Guarapuava that work with robotics. But if you remember the paper when he criticized schools about schools are doing with computer exactly what the schools knows what to do. It's creating discipline, a space, a special space to work with robotics. So the robotics, the coding, this kind of stuff does not go to the inside the class. It's always in a separate space. And the last one is the case of Paraná State Government. When we worked in a project called Software Livre Paraná, Free Software Paraná, and you can see here, software, the free software of Paraná is yours. It was a governmental program, and all things that we can consider free, it was embraced by Paraná State Government, and the Paraná State government was trying to put a Trojan horse inside the educational system. This program was from until the end of the government of Roberto Requião, and after Beto Richa was elected governor, he ended this program, and he made an agreement with Microsoft. So from free software, now you have Microsoft for free. But yes, the argument is based on costs. So if you have Microsoft for free, we don't need free software. So the argument with costs, I think it's problematic because when you go to costs, if Microsoft, Google is bringing to me operational systems and the other systems for free, I can assume that Google is better. So I will take Google and I will not program by myself, by my institution. Will not program, will not do the technological infrastructure that we need. And the last word about appropriation is that this kind of research is appropriated by the Ivory Tower, it's by the university, and by a real educational system, Guarapuava, and by a political agenda that the case of the Paraná State government. But I think that it's not a lack of technologies, it's not a lack of infrastructures, or the communications, or battery, and so on. We have to discuss with education the ideas behind what you are doing at schools. Because 10 years ago, we had technologies that can teach how to that can exercise, that can communicate a better technological tools and better technological opportunities. So is this?
Okay. So we have 0 minutes. So I just want to say that next week we'll continue talking about this topic. But I think the idea today was to first give you, some elements to think about these two kinds of uses of technology: the more instructional kind and the more constructive type, and also to give you, Rodrigo gave some examples of how this was actually implemented in public schools in Brazil, in a way that had all the interesting results that he showed with the video and all of that. And in the same way, there are like hundreds of experiences of those kinds in many different countries that we'll talk about some of them in the next few weeks. But just to give you an idea that those things, they are possible, and when they happen, they have this kind of transformational results in the lives of those students. So, okay. So see you next week.
In this constructivist methodology, you don't allow time for questions, but I'd like to ask one question. And that is, there was a whole previous generation of this idea called main à la patte, hands-on science.
What?
Now, main à la patte in French, hands-on science. And the reason it was called that, it was invented, it was generated by French physicists, a French Nobel Prize winning physicist. And this had quite a long run, if I remember correctly. I saw it in schools here in Palo Alto, I saw it in schools in Brazil, I saw it in schools in Mexico. Anyway, obviously the equipment's not as sophisticated, there were kits,
and stuff, but the idea was the same. The idea was to try to generate interest by the kids in science and innovation, and try to do stuff and introduce them to science by actually working with manipulatives of different kinds. What have you investigated? Sort of, have evaluations been done with that? Did that have any effect on the kids' interest in science? Have you looked at? I mean, someone must have. There must be a literature on that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this program still exists, right? It's still.
Oh, I didn't even know that. It still exists.
It was even implemented in a few places in Brazil too.
Yeah.
Especially in São Paulo. But I don't know if it was evaluated or not. But that's a good thing to look for. But
because the objective was the same,
right.
Not as sophisticated, but basically the same idea, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to look for. But it's been around for like 30 years.
Absolutely, it's been around for a long time.
We have time for one more question. No.
Sure. Go ahead.
I had one question related to the cost. You said that if you compare the cost of textbooks and materials that we have today, that it's not so more expensive to invest in purchasing these sorts of materials. But you said recently, and a lot of people commented on it, and I really like this quote, that out of $10 that you spend, you have to spend 9 on teacher training. And this was the question that I was thinking, like, if you buy this material, and even if it's cheap, actually training teachers to use this effective, looks to me like very expensive. I mean, if I was bringing this idea back home to Recife, I'm sure that the teacher training, service training system that we have over there, it's not capable as it is today to get this material and teach teachers how to use this effectively. I mean, we would have to probably hire some third party to kind of do the training the trainers, and then there will be all sorts of distortions in the process. How are we going to kind of evaluate how the teachers are doing this effectively, or if they're just, as you described, they don't let the kids use the material because it's going to break. I mean, this looks like very expensive to me. It's not, doesn't seem, I don't know, what do you think of this? How do we kind of move forward to kind of make these ideas scalable into public schools?
Yeah, so it's, of course there is, I mean, the actual, you said $10 for 9 is like $1 for 9. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
So, I mean, of course there is a cost to implementing this and to training the teachers and all of that, but it's not as high as it might seem, because, you know, there are smart models that you can implement that can make it more sustainable. So, for example, the models that we have been just, we don't have time, so just quickly, that we've been implementing in different schools in different countries is that you don't have to retrain all the teachers in the schools. You train a small group of core teachers that have more technical training, and then they work with the other teachers over, a couple of years to redesign their lesson plans and to redesign things. So initially you have to train some of the teachers, but the programs that we created, they help those teachers spread the knowledge throughout the school, over a couple of years. So then a lot of the cost is, spread around in this way. So that's one thing. We are now working with the Ravenswood School District here in Palo Alto, for example. It's a district with 7 schools, right? So we're now trying to build a model, a sustainable model to do this within a low-income 7-school district. So we're hiring, for example, people from the community to help the teachers do this work, hire students that are, university students that are like technical students from like engineering and things like that to help with the training. And so I think there are lots of like creative ways you can think about that can you know, it's still gonna be expensive because there's no miracle, but it's not gonna be, you know, as expensive as you might think in terms of like you have to retrain every teacher in the school and all that. So I think there are ways you can do, you know, peer learning, you can do, use the community, use the expertise in people that are around the school, use some resources like, as I said, undergraduate or graduate students that are that want to do community service and things like that. So, but you know, we can talk more about that. But
May I add one quick thing? I think in Brazil, money for training teachers is already there. We don't need new money for that. The governments, they have to spend around 40% of the educational money for training teachers, so the money is there. It's how to do it. So we don't need new money for that in Brazil, I would say.
It's a matter of choice, because you have training to teach the teachers how to create a blog. It's 20 hours. So instead of creating a blog, you can learn logo. You can learn programming. It's a matter of choice, because the training is already there.
My question is concerned about a question I made myself a lot of times. As you probably know, I'm enthusiastic of constructive way of using technology in education. And it seems that it always works better when you've got the time for doing things. And I saw that those projects in the paper are after school workshops. And it seems to me that we are always doing the best possible with the system that is already done, the school system, but not the best we can. It reminds me when the discussion of Poppert and Freire in a video commentary video, in which they were discussing if the technology maybe changes the school system, and Poppert was saying, no, maybe there's no more schools, or the whole of the school is going to change. And Freire was saying, no, the school must change. And I think one of the difficulties that we face when trying to deal with technology this way is that we always keep waiting the school to change itself as a whole. And so I was wondering, the question is, do you think that we can really change the schools, or maybe we should look for other spaces for doing this kind of use of technology?
Yeah, so I think it's very hard to make this like to democratize those kind of things if you don't go through the school system, because I mean, schools, they might be horrible, but they are everywhere, and so they are physically present in places that very few other institutions are. Right? So if you think about science museums or community centers, I mean, they are not nearly as, it's like an order of magnitude or more. Right? So I think schools are really important in that sense. But I think there is this, I don't know, we don't have time, but I think in the more kind of progressive and constructive field, there has been a lot of kind of, it's like this fetish of transforming schools and revolutionizing schools and all of that. And I think it's a discourse that doesn't work anymore, because now it's like it's time to. I think people got kind of a bit exhausted and saturated with this idea that we need to revolutionize schools. It's about to happen, and it's going to happen next year because of this. Yeah. So, and so I think it's more about coming up with smart, well-researched ways to integrate what we do or this kind of things into well-designed curriculum in schools, even if it's not absolutely revolutionary in every aspect. to make compromises with the structure and whatever is there and the state of different school systems, and then slowly trying to increase the amount of time that's dedicated to those kind of things, then to have this kind of discourse of revolution that it will. So what I feel that has worked in a lot of schools I work with is to work with teachers to redesign their lesson plans and every year make them a little bit more constructivist, more interesting, more integrating those technologies. So it's a kind of a slow and incremental work. But what I realize is that once it's in a lesson plan, because schools are conservative, it stays there. So I think that's a different approach. Instead of keep advocating for this kind of revolutionary change that never happens, is to try to integrate elements of the revolution into things that schools can maintain and sustain over the long term.
So hopefully we can continue this conversation next week with Paul as another invited speaker that's going to be talking about technology, because that's, I think, a really great question on today. But we don't have a meeting right now, so we're going to get ahead.
I bring volei.
Oh,
Eu recomendo, gente, tipo, quem não conhece a
Bolo de banana.
Bolo de Guanabara, com goiabada. Eu trouxe o bar do Brasil.
Vamos se ver. Você vai quando? Agora.
Agora.
Você vai para o Spring?
Ele vai para todo o Alisson.
Eu não não, então, não, eu termino em junho, mas não sei como.
Não, mas eu tô dizendo. Você vai terminar em junho. Eu achava que você já ia agora. Você não fica no summer, né?
Então, não sei. É possível, provável que eu fique.
Legal. Você foi lá pra Boston agora?
Não fui.
Foi, né?
Não foi, eu acho. Nossa, foi rápido que eu tava aqui também. Porque, pô, parece que eu nem dei. Casamento. Tava
Eu vi só a verdade, foi interessante.
Não, mas vamos começar.
Vamos marcar um almoço?
É, agora.
O que era um projeto que